Hi there, happy pod lovers. So I was asked to show how I make a death whistle. And I'm not saying this is the only way or the right way or the wrong way or whatever. This is my way that I do it. I watched a bunch of different YouTube videos. There aren't that many actually on making death whistles. But there were enough, and a lot of them I watched didn't even have to do with clay. They were people making them out of PVC pipe and things. And so what I got out of those was the actual mechanics of the death whistle. And so there's a couple of things that are just mechanics of whistles in general. And the biggest thing, so you need a flat plane that's at an angle, and then your air blows on it, and it kind of splits the air coming out so that the air comes down here and circles around, and then the air comes up here and goes over. And death whistle is going to work kind of like blowing over a bottle, so it's going to have a breathier sound, and we're going to put the actual whistle inside of another container. And that will give it kind of an echo and make it sound really eerie. I am using Laguna Frost because that is what I have. I find that whistles tend to work better with less groggy clays or no grog clays, just because you can get a finer point on your it's called a fipple. That's the wedge that the air blows over and it splits it. So what I've done here, I've got a small piece here that I'm going to use for my air tube. I've got a bigger piece here that I'm going to use for the whistle. And then I've got a big piece here that I'm going to use for the actual body of the outer container, if you will. And I haven't decided. I guess we'll make the outer container look like a ghost. Or should we make him look like a face? I've done some in a skull. And what I want to do, let's just go ahead and cut this in half. Because I want to make a pinch pot. I want to make 2 pinch pots and join them, actually. So we'll just cut that in half. And clay a little on the wetter side works good for this. It takes a while to do this. I'm going to put this guy over here. And I'm just going to, just for grins, I'm going to give those a little drink, give him a little drink, keep my water bottle sitting there. And I'll probably mist my surface every once in a while just to keep it. Porcelain is a very thirsty clay, as you can see. See all those little cracks in there, so we're just going to give it a little bit of a drink here. Work that water in. Quick wedge. And I will speed a lot of this up so that you don't have to watch all of my forming parts until we get to the actual whistle part. Because most of you know how to make a pinch pot. Just stick your thumb in, start working your way around, keep the walls even. A lot of times with the smaller ones, I will do these really thin walled, but for a bigger one, I want it a little bit heftier so it holds up. Right now, my big goal is to get the sides pretty even. All right, that guy's pretty even. Let's give him a drink there, give him a drink there. Bring this guy out. And we want to end up with two halves that are the same around here. It doesn't really matter if one's deeper than the other. The big thing is we want them to join properly. So we want them the same around at the mouth. And we want the walls to be as even as we can get them. We will be adding to this later. A little thick down here, so let's thin that out some. All right. So we have two halves that are pretty close to the same size around. Now, go ahead and score this up. You can use a scoring tool, you can use a serrated rib, you can use whatever you want to. The important thing is to get these guys roughed up good so you can get a good join. Now, let me a brush and get some goopies out of my throwing water. And you can also use vinegar. You can just use plain water. However you join is fine as long as you work your joins in good. And actually on this, it's not a piece that is going to be holding water or anything like that. So if you have a crack here and there, it's not the end of the world unless it is counterintuitive to your design. All right. So we got those, and I like to go back and work some of that in a little bit better. Get the clay good. All right. Now we put them together. Get our edges meeting up and just work those seams in together. Sometimes you got to work at it a little bit. That's okay. All right, we got a pretty good marriage going on there. Now let's make it stick. Take my tool here, and I'm just going to start coming and working this in together. Once you get this thing all the way sealed and trap that air in there, then you can start playing with it and making it into the shape you want. All right, now I'm just going to take this nice soft rib and start smoothing this. Just start working it. And start thinking about what shape I want it to be, because this is going to be a head. So a head is not typically round. It's typically kind of elongated. And do I want it to be a skull, or do I want it to be a realistic face? Do I want it to be an animal head, a ghost? What do I want it to be? And again, we'll be adding pieces of clay to this and manipulating it, so you don't have to be terribly precise at this stage of the game, but you do want to start thinking about what your final shape is going to be and start working towards that final shape. All right. Now, it's kind of wanting to be oblong down here, so let's do that. And we can manipulate this quite a bit as we're putting the whistle part in, but I want to get most of it formed now, because once I put the whistle in, I don't want to be playing with it too much and change the sound. And you'll see what I'm saying when we get to that part. Okay. All right, now let's give this guy some eyeballs. And they're usually right in the middle of the head. And you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the space of an eyeball is also the space of the nose. And then there's a space of an eyeball on either side. So that's about right there. And there's usually an indentation right there. And then it comes down. The nose is usually right in there. And it comes down into a chin. So that's pretty good right there. And then we're going to take some of this. One's a little bigger than the other. All right. Get an eyeball there. Get an eyeball there. He needs a nose. And the nose is all right. It looks like a reasonable nose. Let's go with a little guy here. Clay's a little bit dry for this. All right, now I need my nose maker. Okay. And we'll refine this later, but he's got a nose. All right, now we need a mouth. All right, I want him to be screaming. So we need his mouth to be longer and open. So let's work this clay. And I think I want his face to be a little bit kind of misshapen, deformed. Again, let's get a little bit of moisture on here. And what I'm going to do, that much moisture, is roll this out and make kind of an M shape. And let's pull these down. There we go. Bottom lip and chin. We need some chin on this guy. And we need a bottom lip. We'll develop that chin more and drop this down when we open him up to put the whistle part in. But for right now, there's our mouth. All right, back to our eyeballs. Let's get both eyes looking the same way. There we go. And that's just a ballpoint pen, and it gives it a little dot in the middle. It's kind of cool. All right, so we need a little coil. Flatten it out some. Put it under his eye. And we want his pupils to be exposed because he's scared. Okay, get another one. Flatten it out. Put it over his eye. Yep, his eyes are popping out of his head. And what I want to do here, kind of push up on this. Establish that brow. And his eyebrows are raised. Because he's scared. Does he look scared? All right. Cut this guy in half. Skinny on the ends, fat in the middle. Flatten it out. And let's curve it around a little bit. There we go. It's a little too wet. All right. Skinny on the ends, fat in the middle. Curve it a little. Flatten it out. Curve it a little more. And there we go with Mr. Buggy Eyes. And I will fill in a little bit right in here when I do his brows. All right, we need some eyebrow. Again, cut it in half. And this time we want fat on one side and skinny on the other. And just, let's take it and throw it down. And throw it down. And one eyebrow is just a little bit longer than the other, so we just pinch a piece off of that. All right. All right, this is done enough for now. And it needs to firm up a little bit before we can do the next part with him. So let's take him, let's stick him over here. Cover him up with the plastic. And take this. Just a little more with this. And I have to decide, do I want a square windpipe or a round one? Now, with your whistle, the smaller the whistle, the higher pitch the sound. So I'm going to do a relatively big part here. And I might need that longer. Let's make it a little longer. And I'll show you why once we get going here. Because it has to go into the head, and then you don't want where the air flows through to be blocked, or you'll lose your whistle. And we need a little teeny piece to use as a brace. So we'll set this aside, and then this guy is going to be our actual whistle. And I'm just going to get some moisture on here and let that water be soaking in, because porcelain is a thirsty little beast. Okay. That would be enough. And some people make their mouthpiece around a former to start with, so that you don't get like that, where I went a little too far to one side. It's up to you how you do it. Again, this is pottery. There are 100 right ways to do something, and very few wrong ways. If you get the results you're looking for, then it wasn't a wrong way. This might be too big, but I can constrict it if I need to. Okay. Can also cut it off if I need to. Alrighty. Keep this moist. You can sit there. Now we do another pinch pot. And this doesn't have to be super pretty because it's going to be inside of your head that we just made. But it does have to be a good join because you don't want it coming apart during the firing and not working. So I'm just going to take a minute and work this join together really well. Now, another important thing is that this has to fit inside of this. So you don't want this so big that it doesn't fit in that. So think about that when you're making both pieces. And if you have to make that bigger or this smaller to get the effect that you want, then that's what you do. Now comes the fun part. Make sure this is good and pliable. And this I'm going to shape into a triangle, wedge. Because what it's going to do is it's going to go on here and it's going to hold this at a specific angle. So we're going to have to manipulate this at the last minute to get it to the right shape that we need. But for right now, I need a hole poker. And that ought to be a good sized hole right there. So I find a spot. And cut a hole. And you don't want that going in. And you also want this edge to be clean. And we're going to sharpen up a little bit of it here. So I'm going to take my tool. Actually, let me take this part of the tool. And I'm just pressing to get a good sharp edge there. And that is why I said the porcelain or a non-groggy clay works a little better, because with the groggy clay, sometimes that grog helps or prevents you from getting that edge that you want right there. So the inside we want nice and clean. Just cleaning up where I cut that right there. She says as she smears clay inside. Let's see. That looks pretty good. And we'll flatten this down here. And we'll take this and put it on here and go. Too much air. Too much air. So we'll squeeze this down. That's sounding all right. All right, let's squeeze it down just a little bit more. Wet it so we don't break it. Squeeze it down just a little bit more. Restrict that airflow some. That's what we want right there. Okay. So if you noticed how I played with that, now I'm going to put my wedge right here. Mm. All right, now that you got that sound, you want to work your wedge into the whistle body carefully. And into your tube carefully. Then check it again. All right, let's see what we moved. All right, I am not seeing my fipple. Let's work that down just a little bit. Work it down just a little bit more. All right, I need... Nope, wrong tool. This guy. And by the way, when you blow on this quite a bit, your breath has moisture in it. So sometimes you might have to stop and let it dry out before you do any final adjustments. But you want to be able to see this through here, through there. And you want it to... All right, let's set that down and keep it still. Now comes the important part. We have to cut this guy open. And we have to put that in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide, where do I want this coming out? Do I want it coming straight up out of his head like that? Do I want it out the back a little bit? I think I want it out the back a little bit. And that's going to give me room for my whistle part. So I'm going to take my hole puncher here, which is about 2 widths. And I'm going to punch a hole right there. And I'm going to punch a hole right there. And I'm going to take my scalpel. And let's take some out. Set it aside. And let's open this up. Now, when you do this, don't cut your hand, please. And let's give them some moisture so we don't crack them all to pieces. Now, this is where I told you we can start working this chin down from the inside. And we can work this mouth in right here. And decide if we want him to have an open mouth. So what I do sometimes is I'll just go ahead and cut right across here. And this becomes the roof of the mouth. And this becomes the tongue. And you've got an opening right there for your air to come out. Now, let's get this chin worked out a little bit better. And let's get our whistle part in here without tearing up his face and without messing up our whistle. Open up. Open wide. All right, so I don't want the air part to be blocked. Let's see if he still whistles. So you can see how creepy that sounds. Now we're going to take this and we're just going to stretch it out. Because on this guy, I'm not going to have the back of his head opened. It's just going to come out of his mouth. So let's stretch this out some here. And join it back up. A little bit of surgery. We could take some out of there and put it right back down there. Let's get our wooden finger. All right, do we still whistle? Yep. And that, folks, is how you make a death whistle. So this guy will dry. I will wrap him up and let him dry slowly because he's got layers. And some of him is kind of thick. And then I will bisque fire him. And when I glaze him, I may not glaze him. I may just use oxides. But if I do glaze, I'm not going to glaze the inside because I don't want to clog up the whistle parts. And there's no way that I can make sure that they don't get filled. I can't clean them out if glaze gets in the whistle parts. So there's that. He's got a split in the roof of his mouth, but he's going to have to live with that. Anyway, I will futz with this a little bit more, get the shape where I want it, and make sure my joins are good. And I hope you guys have some fun with whistles. I also have a video coming about water whistles, if it's not posted already. So I had some fun with doing water whistles as well. And I hope you guys try this stuff because, you know, it's just fun to experiment. Anyway, stay muddy, keep chasing your dreams, keep challenging yourself, and stay centered. Bye, y'all.